Hello, sir.
Hey, how's everybody?
Doing well. All right. We're not live yet. Oh, yeah, we are live. Okay. We still got about 2 minutes. Julie, do we need to wait the 2 minutes or maybe?
Didn't say 5:30.
Okay.
Well, all of our teams bit the dust.
Oh, yeah, the entire Central, man, on both sides.
Nikki,
Yeah.
Mike has said that he's having Zoom issues again, just so you're aware.
Okay.
I told him to call you if he continued having problems.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 5:30. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Mr. Mars has our language.
Okay.
Mr. President, I motion to adjourn to executive session to consider the following matters. 2.1, student discipline and other matters concerning individual students. 5 ILCS 120/2, C9 and 10. And 2.2, the appointment, employment, or dismissal of employees. 5 ILCS 120/2, C1.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Zimmer seconds. Okay, will the secretary please read the roll?
Yes, Johnson,
Aye.
Mars,
Aye.
McFarland,
Aye.
Zimmers.
Aye.
That is 4 aye votes.
We'll go ahead and adjourn into executive session and return back here at 6:30. Thank you, everybody. For those who watch it on YouTube, the board is out of executive session, but we won't start the full meeting until the scheduled time is 6:30, so bear with us.
72-hour period, but again, we don't know for certain when that was. It didn't necessarily have to be the day of, but have 3 days. And also, if
Hello?
Hey,
Sweet. 2 for 2.
We're just gonna wait for 6:30 to roll around. We'll get rolling.
Hi, Preston. Looks like you have a better connection this time.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Sorry about that, folks. We had somebody have a question at the boardroom. Okay, we'll go ahead and get rolling. It is 6:30. Call the meeting back to order. Based upon the COVID-19 outbreak and the governor's executive orders, the board declares in-person meetings impractical at this time and not prudent based on the nature of the disaster. And also because currently the maximum number of people in one space is limited to 50. And the boardroom capacity with social distancing is 18 audience members if the meetings were held in person at this time. It could limit the number of people who are able to attend and or provide public comment. Holding the meetings through Zoom provides a greater opportunity for our community to participate and provide feedback. So we'll go ahead and move into approval agenda 3.1. Recommended the board approves the agenda for October 5th, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion, a second, any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move into immediate vote. Secretary, please read the roll.
Johnson,
Aye.
Mars,
Aye.
Mathis,
Aye.
McFarland,
Aye.
Ringer. Oh, I missed Miller. I'm sorry, Mr. Miller.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Ringer,
Aye.
Zimmers.
Aye.
That is 7 aye votes.
And the chair, the ayes have it. And the agenda is approved. We'll move into 4.1, President's comments. Public comments will occur during the public comments portion of the meeting. If you're interested in addressing the board, please register to participate in the webinar. Registration to make the public comments will be open through the end of the meeting. If you cannot attend through the webinar, please email your name, phone number, and a topic, discussion, or agenda item number to boe@sps186.org, and you will be contacted on how to participate over telephone instead of the webinar option. We will have on the agenda a discussion about the COVID-19 metrics that we put into place last board meeting, as well as the return to learn plan. So we do have several people who are signed up for public comment on returning to a hybrid model. So we will have those public comments during the discussion item, which is 6.2. That's all I have for tonight. So we'll go ahead and move to the superintendent's report. Superintendent.
Yes, thank you. At this time, I would like to start off tonight by taking a moment of silence for several District 186 family and relations of our District 186 family who we have lost just since the last board meeting. I'd like to take a moment of silence to mourn the loss of a retired parent educator, Aldine Pifus, after her courageous fight with breast cancer, and also the passing of Michael Butler, a longtime volunteer and advocate for students in our community and especially our alternative schools, and also the husband of Monica Walls Butler, a parent educator at Southeast High School. And Aldine was at Grant Middle School, and both of these individuals were well known throughout our school community. But also all of us come to work every day with families that we have at home as well. And I'd like to say also in this moment of silence, if we could think of Aaron Graves, our SEA president, who lost his father this past week. He served his country, our state, and our district at Fairview Elementary School. Also, I'd like to add to that list the brother-in-law of our Director of Teaching and Learning, Sheila Boozer. She lost her brother-in-law who lives out in New Jersey, and it was a COVID-related illness. And then also the mother of Mrs. Lewis, who LaDonna Lewis is the guidance dean at Southeast High School, lost her mother just recently as well. So it isn't lost on me that as people come to work and I work alongside them each and every day, that their families become a part of my family, and any employee is a part of the District 186 family. So if we could take a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Had a great, and this is great to mention after talking about two amazing parent educators in our district, a shout out to our social emotional learning team as they have planned an online remote learning opportunity. This series is called Family Support during Remote Learning. And the sessions are approximately 30 minutes in length. And then it's going to open up for question and answer so families can ask questions and get some directions and guidance. The first session is scheduled for this Thursday, October 8th. The next few sessions are scheduled for October 13th, again on the 22nd and on the 29th. For more information and to register easily online, you just can go to our main webpage, www.sps186.org. The first 4 topics on the 8th, it's going to be managing your frustration and stress during remote learning. On Tuesday, October 13th, it will be Canvas for families and for parents. On October 22nd, we'll be going over supporting your student emotionally during these remote learning times. And then on October 29th, balancing work with remote learning, rest, and play. And all of these would be just fine for hybrid learning as well, but it's just about the times in which we are living and giving families an opportunity to have a little learning and then the ability to have some two-way question and answer time with professionals from the district. So we hope that families take us up on this, and I'm proud of that team for taking the time to put that together. I always announce our meals and what we've been serving so far. So for the month of September, we were able to reach out and serve 51,787 families or students with breakfast and lunch on a given day. And then also just since October 1st, we've served 8,500 lunch and breakfast combos. So we're very proud of our remote lunch service and how it's going, and it's off and going well. And just remember to families, those sites are listed right on the Wayne webpage, and they're open in the morning until 11:30 so that you can come and get a lunch and breakfast meal. This is the month where we celebrate our principals. It is the Principal Appreciation for Illinois Principals Association. So you'll start to see some tweets and things like that, really highlighting the administrators. But at this given point in time, the shout out goes to teachers as they continue to try innovative ways to keep our students engaged during remote learning. We're just seeing some great things happening and great ways that they're reaching out to the families when they're having challenges, and creative ways they're keeping our students engaged. This last Thursday should have been our immunization exclusion day. The board had passed a resolution for October 1st to be the final day. We usually had that at the beginning of the school year. September 10th would have been our exclusion day, and we moved it back. And we've yet again given families another chance to get this taken care of. The actual drop dead date that is a state law is on October 15th. So with that being said, we still have 1,107 students who have something missing in their health immunization records. Of those, we have about 220 who have given us appointments that they have coming up. Either they had it this week or they've got the paperwork at home and they've yet to bring it in. But that still leaves a lot of families who we need to make sure understand the gravity of the situation. You have to get your physical and your immunizations in. If you're a kindergartner, a pre-K student, or you're going into 6th grade or 9th grade, there's a physical requirement, and then also have your immunizations up to date. And some of our 12th grade students also need their shot for meningitis. So we need to make sure that we are getting these taken care of. It is really spread out over all of the schools. Most of our elementary schools are down to just are 20 or under. Many of them just are waiting for 1 or 2 students to get that done. But we do our high schools, our 9th graders and our students that need to get that extra vaccination for meningitis. We are up in the hundreds still with each of our high schools. So we need to make sure that we're focusing on getting those appointments and getting those turned in so we don't have to do any of the exclusion activities on the 15th. Do any of the board members
Can I
have any
ask a
questions
question,
about that? Sure, go
Superintendent?
ahead. Yes.
Has the state legislators said anything about maybe extending that time? This has got to be a statewide issue for everybody.
It is a statewide issue. I have another follow-up superintendent's meeting this Thursday. I've even reached out and called some of our public officials at the state to ask about this. right now, since it is a statute, Illinois State Board cannot, weigh that, go against that. So it would have to be either an action by the governor under an executive order or an extension of the current executive order or something that they would do a statute. And so I'm not sure where it is at this point in time with them, but I know that superintendents across the state are voicing our concern of remote learning. And also, I think it's just been a different road for families this year. It's been, the clinics and things of that nature that we've done in the past were not available because of our COVID crisis in our community. And so it's been a little bit more difficult for families, and people didn't get out in front of it as early this year because of just, the COVID and the, the whole world being shut down, so to speak, for a while.
Well, that's the reason I'm asking, because, usually I'm all over this. I'm willing to cut people some slack this year because you can't just walk into places and get a shot and get a physical like you maybe could have in past years. So that's the reason I was asking if there's been talk statewide about maybe extending that.
Since the last board meeting, we've improved by about 600. So I feel better about that. And knowing that we have at least 200 to 300 that have physical, either have the paperwork at their homes or they have actually gotten appointments. We just need to make sure that people don't forget to go, because they're going to be hard to get a second one around. And I do know that there are many locations that are still accepting appointments. So please call ahead and make sure if you can get an appointment now, that's going to help you a lot. Any other questions on that topic? Micah?
So I just wanted to say also to echo what Mr. Zimmer said. I mean, I understand the importance of vaccinations, but this is a completely different year than what the statute was predicting. And since, you see other governmental agencies, Secretary of State's office, for instance, they're granting extensions to driver's license, to vehicle registrations, because they understand you don't want a lot of people crowding in unnecessarily to visit facilities. So I would be fully on board with granting an extension. I think it would be completely insane to be cutting off people's access to remote learning just because we've hit the 15th and they haven't had their vaccinations. So I understand the statute's written that way, but have the superintendents considered sending a letter with several voices to either ISB or the governor to see if we can get this extension? Okay.
We've kind of been using our lobbying groups to be that voice for us, and that gives us a lot of power in numbers, but we'll continue to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Would it be helpful to send a letter from the board?
Yeah, it might be.
From this board, I would think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Ms. Johnson. Yes.
Yeah, we can work on that.
Yeah. So one other topic that I wanted to bring up to you, and I'm going to do a high level overview, but we have been working very hard to get all of the supplies and materials that we can in place so that when students do return to learn in District 186, that we are ready. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about those in a transparent manner. First and foremost, the district has all of the CDC signs and posters up in the building. We have all of the signs for social distancing, the floor markers, the arrows, all of those things are in place in our schools, much like you might see when you're out and about in any other location in the community. We have provided cloth masks for all of our staff, and we've provided them 2 each from the district, and then also the state of Illinois provided white cloth masks for all employees, on top of all students in the district will be coming back into when they come back into the schools, we'll have a free mask from the state of Illinois. In addition, we have just purchased our personal protective equipment across the system, gloves, gowns for nurses, all of the things that we need, I call them one use, the blue face masks. We have face shields that are prepared for our nurses, aides, and attendants in addition to their face mask. We have in common areas and classrooms, we have hand sanitizer, and we have kind of the pumps that are up on the wall, and then also some individual stands throughout all of our buildings that are brand new. We've ordered clear face masks for our speech and language teachers, our English as a second language learners, all of our occupational therapists and physical therapists, our pre-K, kindergarten teachers, interventionists, all have those clear face masks so that the teacher can teach and also be seen by the students. We have plexiglass installed in all office areas across the district, as well as many other locations where that request has been made. We have goggles that have been purchased also for nurses and our occupational therapists and physical therapists. And all of those have come in and are ready to go for distribution. The nurses have had some other specialized requests, and we have also granted them that request as well. And we've actually are going to have a gown service through Aramark, where we have the cloth gowns that are available that can be laundered and then also returned. And they're laundered at a temperature that's appropriate for sanitization. We've got a planning protocol in place for training all staff that may have to work with any type of physical needs that a student may have or changing areas. We'll have things for visitors that come in the building, although we are limiting the number of visitors that do come into the building on a regular basis. We have spray bottles with disinfectant spray and also towels for all of the classrooms and teaching spaces across the district. In addition, we have done walkthroughs at every school with the staff of those schools to determine room capacities, traffic flow in the hallways, making sure that we know exactly where the buses will arrive and where students will come in and which doors they would come in. Appropriate spaces for the nurse, and that includes isolation areas. We've actually built some isolation curtains in each of the buildings so that if a student is portraying any type of symptom and we're worried about coughing or air particles, that they can be in these small, clear, see-through isolation areas. So we are working hard to make sure that everything is in place for when students can return to learn. We also have a crisis cleaning team that is ready to go at a moment's notice, even in the evening or over the weekends, to clean any spaces with deep cleaning protocols. Cleaning is one thing, sanitizing is another. So making sure that we have the ability to do both and make sure that spaces are prepared so that learning can occur. So I just wanted to mention those things. I talked to a parent earlier this week, and they were concerned that we didn't have just what we have done, and we're concerned that we weren't preparing ahead, but we most certainly are. Every school has created and it's turned in a safety plan, and that's a return to learn safety plan that walks through their individual buildings. And what I'd like to do is send those to the board also, so that you have copies of our safety plan at this point in time, that the principals have been turning in, and they've been working alongside their instructional leadership teams as well to get that important teacher voice at the table. It goes through things such as arrival for your morning drop off, where the buses will come, where the car riders will come, where the temperatures will be checked as they come in the buildings, making sure we have enough thermometers for each of those doors and all of the right materials at each of those stations, making sure the scope personnel have all of those things under control, as well as any other groups that serve students inside our schools, 21st Century being one of them. Also the building entry, just where are the students going to go up on arrival? How are we going to divide them into smaller groups and make sure that we keep them in alphabetical order and keep them in knowing where, so that we can monitor the social distancing and monitor social contact throughout the day. We have health and temperature check questions so that we know who's going to do that every day, who's going to be in charge of getting everything set up and ready to go, and then making sure we have an understanding of all the supplies that they may need to have at those symptom check stations. The isolation space area that we already talked about, how we will do breakfast service and lunch service at the school, how we will limit visitors to the school, and how we will check any visitors that must come in. And that's from essential workers that are coming in the building to any parent who may have to come to pick up a child. It goes over the hallway traffic and how students will flow throughout the building. If there is an elevator, what the rules and use will be for that. How we'll handle water bottles and water fountains for the schools. We do have installed the water bottle stations at many of our fountains throughout the district now, where you just put the bottle up and you can refill your bottle and not use the actual water fountain. Also, anything to do with indoor, outdoor recess time or any type of free time throughout the day. And then how we will handle the use of restrooms, because we know at elementary school, that's a whole plan process that we have to go through. We've trained staff on the sanitation protocols, as I mentioned before, requested all the PPE, and have a process where there is an actual flow chart of all the supplies on hand, how they reorder, who they reorder from, and who's in charge of reordering those materials at the school. And also the classroom spaces have been, as we said, we have walked through, we have marked off where all of the desks should be, so that they are 6 feet apart in a staggered fashion. That we've removed the carpets and the furniture and the things like that that may retain the COVID virus. Also, just duty schedules and how staff are going to be involved in helping us with all of these things, but also just how we monitor the hallways differently. How we work with any of our structures that just are normal day to day and how they might change. And then also, of course, dismissal time, where the buses come and how they are going to take the students from the class and move them out to the bus or the car rider lane, or send them walking as they normally might do. So each school has deeply thought through this. Every plan is as different as the school and the structure of the school and the number of students at the school. So this is the work that the principals have been doing so that we are ready to return to learn when we know that it is safe to do so. I will save any reports from Gail O'Neill for the section on the old agenda item for you.
Thank you.
That's kind of where I am at
Superintendent,
this point in time.
I have an instructional question. I've
Sure.
heard from a couple of constituents. They're concerned that not all schools are on the same time schedule as far as the number of hours kids are remote learning.
Okay.
If you could dispel that, or probably if you could tell us, what are the expectations? How long are we expecting students to be in remote learning each day?
Did you have a certain grade level at mind, just to clarify?
I'm thinking it was more relegated to elementary,
Okay.
is my
So
understanding.
with the elementary schedule, really teachers are teaching off and on for the 5 hours, but they are giving lots of breaks during that time, and actually either having kids log off Zoom and get back on, or just having them keep their Zooms open while they have their breaks and their lunchtime. When they have their brain breaks and activities, like we don't want kids looking at the screen for 5 straight hours. The state does ask us to have 5 hours of learning prepared for students each day. And that can be a combination of direct instruction face-to-face through Zoom, combined with homework and any activities that the students may be doing and participating in. The minimum they state that students should be in direct instruction is 2.5 hours a day. But we know that we're spreading that out, even 2.5 hours directly. Like if you just went 8 to 10:30 might be a lot for most of our younger learners. So there's a lot of kind of on and off, and teachers are using a lot of creative ways to put up timers and things like that to bring kids back into learning. So I would say that it's just like walking into different classrooms throughout the school year. You might see different ways that it's structured and put together, but that's no more than 5 hours of any instruction throughout the day, and about 2.5 hours of that direct instruction.
I also want to talk about that a little bit. So there's a 4th grade class that I know at one of our elementary schools who is getting well over 4 hours of Zooms. And it seems to me if the teacher is frustrated about that, and if the parents are frustrated, and the remote learning plan says 2.5 hours, I just wonder why they're continuing to put kids through that if nobody really seems to be on board with that amount of screen time.
Without knowing specifically which teacher, you can talk to me later so that I can kind of analyze that schedule. I do know that a lot of times it's not forced, or I mean, this is what I've been told in the classes that I've been in, that I've seen. It's not necessarily all direct instruction during that time, but it could be a series of on and off and activities and things that they want the students to work on, and then they come back on to Zoom. But remote teaching and remote learning is remote through the computer, and it's, you know, it wouldn't be remote learning if we're not in contact with the students. We're trying to give them that same direct instruction that we would throughout the school day if we were in person, and the only way we can do that is through Zoom contact or, you know, class teaching.
Yeah. In this case, it's 8:30 to 2 o'clock, and there's a 45-minute break for lunch, and there are some 5-minute brain breaks. But even just throwing a 5-minute brain break in between can be a lot. You know, having, you know, dealt with this with a first and a third grader, they're doing 45-minute sessions 4 times each, and you know, 3 hours is a lot for them. So I'll send you some more details after.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Miller. Thank you.
Anything else for the superintendent's report? Okay, we'll go ahead and move into discussion items. While we may include old and new business as agenda items, we must modify our approach to these items during the COVID-19 period. Discussion of old and new business must be confined to emergency and or time-sensitive issues only. With that being said, does any board member have any old business? Okay, seeing none, we'll move into the next discussion item, which is the COVID-19 metrics, as well as the return to learn plan. Just so everyone's on the same page, and I know the superintendent has some information as well too, looking at the DPH metrics that were put out last week, we are in line with 3 out of our 4 of the metrics we approved. The one that we are out of line on to is the cases per 100,000. And superintendent, I think you have some more information on that as well too.
Well, obviously, I've been asked to have a report from Gail O'Neill at each of our board meetings. So I do have a follow-up from her today. She is always very, very helpful. She has created a chart for me that goes from July 1st of 2020 to the October 2nd, 2020. And I did send that to the board. It came later today from Mrs. O'Neill's office. So I apologize for getting it out to you a little bit late, but you do have all of this information. When we started off this on July 1 is where the data begins. We had for that first week of July, 27 total cases of persons under the age of 20 is what she's considering. You know, so it goes, it says teens and then it's 20s. And so this one is just all persons under the age of 20. For the second week of July, we had 28 total. For the second week third week in July, we had 29. For the fourth week, we had a total of 18 people who were in that position. And then it continues to go throughout. These are new cases that came about, and then the number total for that week. So with the beginning of August, which is kind of when we came back to the school year, that first week in August, there were a total of, let's flip over the page here, 20 new cases for 32 total cases in the county. For the second week in August, there were 17 new cases for a total of 33. As you know, COVID, you stay positive for those 14 days that you're in the quarantine time. For the third week, we had 17 new with 33 and 27 new with a total of 34. And then for the final week, it was 19 for a total of 35 that were still active cases. Getting into early September, that number did jump up quite a bit and they had 52 new cases. And we do have to remember that this does include those 18, 19 and 20-year-olds. Students who are kind of headed off to college at that point in time. And so there was 52 new cases in the region. The next week after that, there was 36 additional cases. For the next week of the 15th through the 19th, there was 13 new cases. And then just recently from the 20th until the 26th, there was 25. And then the latest number she had that took us into the beginning of October was 17 new cases at this age range. So those are information that you had kind of requested last week with the actual number of students or or people who were getting the illness that were under the age of 20. Most of our students are graduated at the age of 18. We do have some 19-year-olds. The 20-year-olds probably are not connected to the school district. At this point in time today, she is reporting 78 new positives. There were 24 on Saturday, 10 on Sunday, and 44 today. And those are all age groups combined. That does provide a 3.7% positivity rate and 92 out of 100,000, which does put our county metric at the warning level. However, when you look at the IDPH school metrics, which are what we use, that does keep us at the moderate level at this point in time in that category. Julie, can you put on the screen the one pager that we provided? So this is the metrics that the school board put forth over on the left-hand side. And then you can see where we are with our rate is the yellow is kind of where we're off, like you mentioned earlier, Mr. McFarland. So I'll turn it over to you if you have any discussion you'd like to have. These are the numbers for the week of the 20th through the 26th, and you can see the previous week as well.
Well, and just so everyone's aware too, I did ask Ms. Earlham before this meeting if we can get this up on the website. She said she was going to work on that too. So parents and teachers can go and see this data as we update it week to week. So that should be up on the website here soon. Does any board member have any discussion?
I, again, from the last meeting, still feel that new case rate, when you consider the equal to or less than or 50, I still think that should be put up to 100. I think that number is going to swing a lot. And when you're looking at new cases per 100,000, but we still have a metric that's going to give us a new case increase anyway, and that's still at minimal. So, Mr. President, if you'll entertain it, I would like to make a motion to amend the metrics to increase them to the threshold of cases per 100,000 to less than or equal to 100 instead of where it's at 50. And that would be the moderate level as outlined by IDPH. I still feel that it's unrealistic. And I think that number is going to fluctuate like crazy when you've noticed that all three, if you will, board members, all three of the other the positivity rate, new use case increases and new case increases have stayed.
Let's before you continue on with your discussion, let's see if you have a second, okay?
Sure.
So there's a motion. Is there a second? Again,
Second.
okay. Now, Ms. Mathis, please continue.
Yeah, I just think that it would be different if we didn't have something to account for new case increases, and we do. And I think that that's a weird thing to have with the new case rate and the new case increase when you're talking about 179 is minimal, and then per 100,000 is 92, having 92 being moderate. It just would seem that number makes, when you're looking at the other thresholds, it makes more sense because those are going to increase or decrease slower over time versus that number jumping up from week to week. If we're trying to create some consistency when we do return to learn, I just think that needs to be raised up.
If I can say something here, but if you look at this chart though, look from week 913 to 920, each one of those categories increased, and they didn't just increase by a little. It's just, you're right, it's too inconsistent from week to week, but in the first week of October, it may be worse. We had 55 cases Friday, we had 44 today. So it's not gone, I mean, it's still out there, and I think we need to be cognizant of that. I'm afraid of raising that to 100 because that's not what IDPH tells us should be minimal. It's 100, they say 50. And if we're going to go by what science is telling us and what the experts are telling us, I think we need to do what they're recommending. It's just my personal opinion.
And real quick,
just a little bit of pushback on that. And
What?
just a little pushback on that though, Mr. Zimmers, we had guidance from IDPH and ISB with the phase 4 guidance to return to school, which prioritized getting in-person learning for 13 and younger, those with IEPs, other special groups that needed that assistance. So, I mean, to negate that we have guidance that supports that too, in addition to the metrics here, I think is also disregarding experts that got together during this pandemic to provide some guidance on how to best create in-person learning opportunities. So, to just keep kids in remote all school year, when you've got these other metrics here that I think provide some more of a grace period of time, and they're not jumping from, you're not going to see 3.7% to 5% tomorrow. This number that we're looking at with the new case rate per 100,000 is kind of like, okay, per 100,000, so 50 out of that. It just seems to be way too volatile of a metric there when you, in comparison to the other three that have stayed pretty stable in the sense of jumping up from one thing to another.
But I'm not sure we're not going to go up dramatically. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but Illinois, for the longest time, every state around us was red, and we were kind of in the minimal range. All of a sudden, Illinois is red, which says to me the whole state's increasing again. We're having a spike. And so I would say probably these numbers are going to increase. And one of the things we'd said, and you probably agree with this, that we have to see several weeks of a decline, and we're not seeing that right now. We're seeing it go up, we're seeing it go down, we're seeing it go up, and there's no consistency to it. So that's my concern, that we have to have several weeks of numbers that are continually dropping, and we're not seeing that.
Mr. Miller had his hand up.
Yeah. So a couple of things on this chart. The bottom two categories are actually substantial. That's basically the highest risk. If we've gone from 8 to 27 under new youth cases, that is definitely more than 5 and 10% of an increase. It's about, 300%.
To be clear, though, Mr. Miller, the IDPH metrics do say minimal. So I'm not entirely sure how they're calculating that percentage, but they continue to say that is minimal.
Well, that doesn't follow their methodology, though. They say from week to week, you can't have more than 5 or 10%. So maybe they got it wrong. Also, the bottom one, 119 to 179 is not defined as minimal. That's substantial. So yeah, we're not even close according to all three. And I mean, I don't care if they're calling that minimal, that is not minimal. 119 to 179 by their own methodology is substantial.
But we can't say their own methodology, and they're also providing these metrics for schools.
Well, they define it as the change of the total count of new cases during 7 days from week to week. So, I mean, that's the change from week to week. That's, you can see for yourself, that's not 10 and 20%. So, I mean, they're not perfect. Maybe they got something wrong here, but that's 3 out of the 4 categories that we haven't met. So it's not like we're even really close. And as Mr. Zimmer said, this is tracking up. We just had approximately 220 cases over week 40, and IDPH hasn't rolled that out yet, but that's the real numbers from Sangamon County, and that's going past even 100 out of 100,000. So,
but again, if we've got these rates here and the rates have remained where they've labeled them as minimal, regardless of the increase itself, that is what we're tracking.
I would just track what the actual numbers are. If I don't care what they're calling it, you can see right there. I mean, it could go up to 1,000, and if they call it minimal, we're not just going to stick by that.
Well, I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, are we letting the scientists and the doctors that provide this type of information and guidance, like, are we ignoring it? Are we listening to it? Are we making up things that don't make sense just because we don't want kids to go back to school? Because again, at what point are we going to work through this to figure out how we can prioritize in-person learning as instructed by ISB and IDPH in the phase 4 guidance that we all got back in July, and I think came out in June. And you've got school districts around us that are also experiencing a lot of problems with remote learning. It's not effective, and it's not working that great. And you got a lot of parents that are upset and want to figure out, when are their kids going to return to school? And I think that that's a fair question. The remote only are always going to be remote though too. So we're not forcing people to go back to school who did not choose to be in that hybrid option.
We need to focus this discussion into, because we're talking about a motion to change one metric, not the other 3. So if we can keep the discussion at this point to the one metric, and then once that motion is either passed or failed, then we can go into a full discussion on everything else as well too.
Also with the increases, are we taking into account places, I believe Brother James Court had an increase, a spike in cases? I mean, you just have to account for where some of this is happening as well. All those things matter, just like that backlog that got dumped and it spiked up the numbers. So I just think that there's a lot that goes into that. But that new case rate is the one that's going to fluctuate like crazy. And from what we've seen, it jumps quite a bit up and down to get us from minimal to moderate. But these others have hovered. At 4.3, we were still considered minimal. So, I mean, and we've gone down because 4.3, I think when we first got these metrics introduced to us is where we were at.
And
So-
again, right now, the motion in hand is discussing not positivity rate, but the cases per 100,000. So if we can get through that motion,
Correct.
and then we can have a discussion on any other topic with the metrics, but also return to learn is part of the agenda as well too. So any more discussion on the motion? Mr. Miller, go ahead.
Real quick, if I can clarify something. So according to their metrics, these numbers have to not see that kind of a change for 2 consecutive weeks. So I guess that's where they're still listing it as minimal. So I just wanted to offer that.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Again, just to clarify, the motion from Ms. Mathis is to change the metric when it comes to cases per 100,000 and increasing it to less than or equal to 100, as opposed to less than to equal to 50, which is what we have it now. And again, this is not changing the resolution that we would need 2 weeks in that category before we can talk about going to a hybrid option. So any more discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move into a vote on the motion at hand. Will the secretary please read the roll?
Mars,
Aye.
Mathis,
Aye.
McFarland,
Aye.
Miller,
No.
Ringer,
Aye.
Zimmers,
No,
Johnson.
No.
That is 4 ayes and 3 noes.
Okay, being the chair, the ayes have it. That metric is amended. However, again, we would still need to see 2 weeks at those metrics before we could still discuss moving into a hybrid option. So now we'll move into discussion on anything dealing with the metrics, any other motions, anything like that, or also discussing the return to learn piece. Does any other board member have any other discussion? The one piece I have, Superintendent, can you go into a little bit more detail on any of the smaller cohorts that were discussed that you're working on that would be outside of the full hybrid return?
Yes. You know, we have worked very diligently to look at the students who are struggling the most with our remote learning, not to say that there aren't many who are, but our students in our self-contained special education classrooms across the district. This has a lot of different titles associated with it, cross-categorical, our students with life skills, our students with you know, emotional and behavioral concerns, and then also our students with autism across the district. And we've got a detailed plan for each of those classrooms, only for those families who have chosen to come back hybrid. We are still going to offer remote services for all students whose families are choosing remote. And we will have teachers that specifically also chose to go remote, actually teaching those students. So we will continue to offer that plan of action, but then offer an opportunity for students to come back into a hybrid format. And we are looking at the earliest, it could be the week of the 13th, but we are now looking a little bit closer to the 20th. We think that might be a better target date for us to make sure we have everything in place to make sure that it's a very seamless transition back into school. So that's just a week and a half away. It would be right after our next board meeting. And so that's the cohort that we wanted to get back in the earliest and make sure that everything was set up and planned. Once again, we've already got the safety plans in place to make sure that we have all of our logistics set up and agreed to at each of the school levels. And now it's just setting up busing, communicating with individual families, making sure that all of the transportation is set up for these students. Many of our life school students travel out to Lee School and have multiple routes, but we are ready. We had meetings all day today with each of those individual teachers.
Does anyone have any discussion on any of those topics, including the metrics or also return to learn, both hybrid and cohorts? Go ahead, Ms. Johnson.
So you have enough teachers to staff the number of kids that you're anticipating putting back into these buildings
Yes, ma'am.
for the special education?
Yes, they have all of their class lists and their teachers who also chose to come back and teach hybrid.
Okay, so is it possible you could put up on each, at least each individual building that will have students, what the metrics are that you've established in the protocols? Like you said, you in your superintendent's report, there's something out there that we could go in and look at.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
I mean, so the parents could be aware of what's going to happen to their kids if they are in a building.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Okay. As long as that's made public knowledge,
I think the best place to put that,
Yeah.
Superintendent, any additions is you've got that return to learn button right on the front page. If we can
Yeah.
make that the landing page for all that stuff, I think it'd be helpful.
No problem.
Superintendent, at this particular point, do we have an estimate of how many students we'll be able to service with this first rollout?
It's a little over 300 students.
Thank you.
Any other discussion for this discussion topic?
And when it comes to the hybrid option, once that fully rolls out, is there any option to move to 4 days instead of 2, depending on how many they have enrolled at hybrid at the schools? Because I know when we talk about it as a whole, it sounds like a lot, but I know when we were looking at registration numbers through this whole time, there were some schools that had 80 kids registered for hybrid, 100. Is there any possibility, instead of having it be 2 days on, 2 days off and nothing on Monday, that self-study on Monday, that it could move to a 4-day model? I just think, thinking from a parent point of view, it's easier to find someone to deal with your kid on a Monday or that 1 day than, 2 on, 2 off. Just a question that I had from constituents as well.
The biggest barrier we have is the CDC guidelines in regards to how many students can be in a classroom. Some schools probably could manage that just fine, but then it becomes an equity issue across all of our schools. And if all the kids want to go to this school because there's 4 days, then they're going to get too big and not be able to offer it. The biggest problem is most of our classrooms, as you know, across the district operate with anywhere from 23 to sometimes 30 in a high school. And our rooms are not set up with the CDC distancing rules to really have more than 12. Some rooms could get up to 15, but it's very limited in size. So that does restrict us a bit with the social distancing, which we want to make sure is in place 100%. And just reminding everybody when we come back, even if we're social distance, we'll still have to mask up every single day in all settings, in the classroom and in the hallways, probably all the time, except for when we're eating lunch, and then we'll still need to be socially distanced.
I think people need to be aware too that we haven't even started hybrid yet, but we're having teachers that are in the building doing remote that are getting COVID. We're having students on athletic teams that are getting COVID. I just want to make people aware of that.
Right.
We haven't even started school yet. We're already experiencing COVID with kids and teachers. So
one thing that I asked Gail, and she did write a paragraph here, and I'll read it to you. I had that same question, Mike. It's just kind of how she felt about the community spread. She said, "We have had reports of positive students and teachers throughout Sangamon and Menard counties," because they cover Menard County as well. But none of them have been associated with a spread at the school at this time. They reported to have been socially connected or family acquired at this point in time. So she did say that in their contact tracing, there hasn't been any actual spread in a school through either the teachers or the students at this point in time, which is good.
But that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter where you got it. If you're coming into school and you have it, you're going to spread it. So it doesn't matter who you had contact with. It's a matter of how you're spreading it.
Right. And yeah, if the kids get it from one of those other kids, it would matter greatly. And the other thing that we'll have to remember is when we do come back into hybrid, families will have to be ready for those brief closures that we most definitely will have to have with the start and stop. Hopefully it won't be forever if we put the right things in place, but those 10 to 14 day stops are are difficult as well. But, you know, it's just a part of our lives these days, for sure.
And another thing, COVID's not going away anytime soon. So when an immunization comes out, you're still going to deal with people who may or may not get the immunization the same way we do with a lot of other things that go on. So this notion that we're ever going to get to a point in the near future, the next 2 school years, even that COVID's going to be eradicated somehow, I think is a misnomer. And to me, really isn't the point. The point is mitigating a crazy spread by making sure that you're keeping those stable classrooms, that people are masked up, because the masks do work, and so does the social distancing. But the thought that it's going to go away, I'm not really sure how that's even really part of the conversation. And if we're saying all this and we're in phase 4, and I've said this before, phase 4 is the best we can hope for until there's a phase 5, and phase 5 would be no mask anywhere and we return to normal life. So you know, we need to be mindful that what we're setting up here now is going to probably travel into the next school year, and that could be really problematic if we're not willing to understand that this is what we're living with, and we're just looking for the best way to work through it, because a lot of the educational gaps that already exist are continuing to widen, and that's only going to get worse, and that's a problem. So I just think that there's a lot at stake, and I by no means want to make it seem as if I don't take it seriously, or that I don't care, or that I don't acknowledge what Mr. Zimmer's point is, but it really is about us figuring out a way to work through this.
Well, and that's okay until it's our children that get sick, then we might have to have a different perspective on that. And that's what people need to understand. What these kids are coming back to, and I said this several board meetings ago, is not going to be normal. It's not going to be a normal. I think people are looking for normalcy. What they're coming back to is not going to be normal. They're going to be wearing masks, going to be socially distanced, going to have the temperature taken every day. There's not going to be a homecoming. There's not going to be a city tournament for them to come to. So they're not coming back to normal. They're coming back to something, but it's not normal. So I think people need to understand that, because that's what I keep hearing. These kids need normalcy. I get that, but this is not going to be normalcy in the traditional sense.
And something else that I don't know was reported or in the report from Sangamon County, but today they said there were 3 more people that died from COVID. So, I mean, we're talking about the safety of this issue as we lost 3 more residents here in Sangamon County, and one was in his 50s, the other in his 60s. So,
and I think before we turn to hybrid 2, and superintendent, maybe you've already done this, but maybe it needs to be repeated. I think teachers need to know exactly what their responsibilities are for keeping children safe when they come back to school. I mean, there are a lot of rumors out there about what they're going to have to do in between classes and this and this and this. And I think it needs to be spelled out specifically for teachers that are coming back into the hybrid, exactly what their responsibilities are on a daily basis. So they're aware of it. They're not caught short. I'm not sure that's happened, but if it has, good.
Well, I believe that's
those are the people that are
what
going to get
those
sick.
plans, yeah.
Those are the people that are going to get ill, are the adults.
And you have to also remember, if you look at the numbers that she sent out today, there's 10 teens in there. And the 3 people that died today, I think were from the Brother James Court or whatever it's called. But somebody has to be taking that into the facility. So we have to be concerned about who's going to bring what into our buildings. That those numbers could be astronomical at some point. So we got to be careful with these kids. It's not necessarily that the kids are bringing it. It could be an adult who's had contact is bringing it in. And if it happens to be a teacher, then, you know, the whole class could be affected.
Well, and that's why if and when we move back into the classrooms with any small group or larger group, mitigation efforts must be key. So if mask wearing is not being done, then we've already discussed with our staff that those people will have to be moved to remote. Same thing with ensuring social distancing and everything else. So that mitigation will be important, even if you have a few people in the building or dozens of people in the building. Any more, Mr. Miller?
I've got a question for the superintendent. Taking a trip down memory lane, you did indicate that teachers would have 10 days notice before returning. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
And we could return on the 26th at the earliest.
Right. Well,
Okay.
it would be the 27th, that Tuesday, the 27th.
So I'm just kind of trying to look at the map here where we stand, and that would put us somewhere around Friday, October 16th, that a decision would have to be made, which for that,
And right now, we couldn't make that decision based on the metrics that we put forward because we haven't had 2 weeks. So,
Right.
yeah.
And so that week, we would have most of the data. We wouldn't get anything by IDPH in time because they're like a week late. But we could reasonably kind of extrapolate how that week is going.
Mhm.
But based upon what I'm seeing, the week that just ended on the 3rd, if Sangamon County reported 220 cases, then that's over 100 per 100K. So it sounds like it's likely that we didn't meet all the metrics in that week. So this, I'm guess what I'm looking at is we really only have a couple weeks here,
Mhm.
Yes.
the 4th through the 10th and 11th through the 17th, in order to give enough time to teachers. So this, I just wanted to make sure that was right. It looks like we've only got these 2 weeks we have to nail in order to hit the target date.
Yep. And the goal of that, the original resolution we had talked about the last meeting, or actually 2 meetings ago, was it'll continue to roll. So if we don't hit that 27th, but it starts getting better here in the end of October, beginning of November, well, then we can start talking about hybrid as we go through that. So it's one of those that will continue to move throughout the remainder of the semester. And as Ms. Mathis said, probably into the next semester too.
Yeah, just so you, the reasoning behind the 27th was it was the start of the second quarter.
Yeah.
For all of our middle and high school students. And that's just a good division of time for learning to happen and the assessments and all of those kinds of things.
If there's no more discussion, if there is, please say so. But we also have public comment for this section. So if there's no more discussion from the board, we'll go into public comment. Any more discussion from the board? Okay. We have several folks, I think all but one, that are signed up for public comment or signed up for this topic. I'm pulling that up right now. So Ms. Hammers, is it Sarah Rogers who'll be first?
Yes. Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
And let me read this real quick. I apologize. I should have read this before I called the first name. Board of Education, I encourage public comment and public participation in the board meetings. However, it is inappropriate for any person to name a student or individual employee, including designating an employee by the job title rather than the name in open session. If any public commenter wants to address issues related to an individual student or a District 186 employee, that commenter is invited to contact the board office or a member of the cabinet prior to public comment. It is not the intention of the board to discourage public comment in any way. Rather, it is the intention of the board to address issues regarding individual students and employees in an appropriate manner. We thank you for respecting the privacy of our students and employees by following this rule. And Ms. Hammers, go ahead.
Okay. Ms. Rogers, you will have 3 minutes from the time you start, and I will let you know once your time is up. You may begin.
Okay, thank you. Hello, board members and Superintendent Gill. I am Sarah Rogers, and I am one of the ones that has presented a petition to you earlier today with over 600 names and comments from people in the district. In only a few days and with a limited platform, we were able to gather many signatures from families and kids who attend Southeast, Lamphere, Springfield, Jefferson, Franklin, Washington, Feichens, McLernan, Matheny, Lindsay, Wilcox, just to name a few. Talking with so many families and students of the struggles they're experiencing has been both eye-opening and heartbreaking. These kids and their parents are literally begging to go back to school. The current model has not been working for them. This petition, as well as numerous letters and pleas, should be enough evidence to add the hybrid model. If you're going to rely on metrics, which thank you, Tiffany, for increasing the 100 per 100,000, because that does help, we do need to listen to IDPH and ISB because they already outlined acceptable school metrics, and Sangamon County was well within the range to return to in-person learning. Superintendent Gill just discussed safety measures put into place and schools are ready to go. In addition, guidelines on how to deal with positive cases without shutting down entire schools have been documented, and many schools around us are utilizing these measures when necessary. I have a daughter who's a junior in high school in 186, as well as a 5th grade son who currently attends parochial school. My son goes to school with a current enrollment of about 425 students all day, 5 days a week. He does specials, recess, art, technology, Everything on a normal school day wears a mask and is distanced. They have safety protocols in place and it is working. Many area schools have been doing very well with the hybrid or full-time model, and many more are getting back to the classroom in the next few weeks. So my question to you is this: how can so many schools be teaching in person successfully, yet our district is not? You as board members were elected to represent all children and families, yet you are representing only those in favor of remote learning. This is not equitable learning across the board, and many children are falling farther and farther behind by not being in the classroom. The disadvantages of having to learn at home are numerous, and you've heard those risks over and over again. The virus is not going away, and I feel like you are taking those risks over the potential of getting the virus. And the economic impact this is having on families is paramount. Parents are having to make a choice whether to earn money for their families or stay home to supervise their children. Single parent households don't get a choice. They're forced to leave their kids unattended at home, leaving older siblings in charge of younger ones, all while trying to navigate online learning themselves. We cannot put life on hold forever. This is not going away. I urge you to let these kids get back to school. All we are asking for is 2 days a week. It can and is being done safely and effectively all around us. We owe it to the students of 186 to do the right thing. Thank you.
Time's up. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ms. Rogers. I believe our next is Tricia Nessen-Becker.
Ms. Becker, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. You'll have 3 minutes from the time you start, and I'll let you know once your time is up. You may begin.
Good evening. My name is Tricia Nelson Becker, and I have 3 children in District 186 schools, 2 at Springfield High and 1 at Lincoln Magnet. They are 4th generation District 186 students. Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought that someday as a mother, I would be speaking to the Board of Education to ask for my children to be allowed to enter a district building to attend school with teachers present in the classrooms. The pure absurdity of that statement is overwhelming, yet here I am. I believe in the promise and the potential of this district, but I find myself before you tonight frustrated that this board is not protecting the rights of its students to have the educational experience that they deserve and that the taxpayers pay for them to have. My kids and thousands of others are suffering both academically and emotionally because of your decision to not allow a hybrid option first quarter, and now we are 2 months further behind in the process to return. I want the choice that is mine alone to decide to allow my kids to attend in-class learning. You have been presented with a petition of over 600 people who could not all speak here tonight, but who want a voice. The board voted to allow a hybrid option and a remote option, and then because of pressure exerted by the unions, reversed that decision. The teachers I have asked say they want to be back in their classrooms, but most are afraid to speak up because they are afraid of the backlash. So I am also here to support those teachers who want to return to the classroom like we do. Teachers are essential workers. To those who say it's too dangerous, yes, March and April were scary. We did what we had to do to allow medicine and science to understand and advise so we could protect the most vulnerable. October is a different time and we are ready to move forward with precautions that we know work. Like neighboring districts and local parochial schools, let District 186 enact the safety measures it has planned and use the guidelines put forth by ISB and IDPH to deal with positive cases. Superintendent Gill, if you can, I would appreciate it if you would also speak to the use of these guidelines when there are cases and how they will be managed and potentially affect others in the school in more detail. Do not just look at the metrics, also look at the demographics within those metrics. Use common sense. Parents, kids, teachers, nurses, and maybe even yourselves are going to offices, restaurants, stores, socializing with family and friends, going on trips, going to daycare, scope, and sports practices in district buildings. If we can all do these things, then our kids can attend school. There will always be a risk, but you are forgetting the benefits to in-class learning and being with friends and teachers in a safe, nurturing environment. To me, those benefits far outweigh the statistical risk coronavirus poses to kids and to healthy working adults. Our kids' lives, the most important ones, have been put on hold, and it is heartbreaking to watch as a parent. Personally, I'd like to see them return to school more than just 2 days a week, but even just to start with
Becker,
hope
your
for
time
more.
is up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next person is not on the line, I believe. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we'll have Jay Winkleman.
Mr. Winkleman, I believe that you're muted.
How about that?
Yes, we can hear you now. You'll have 3 minutes from the time you start, and I will let you know once your time is up. You may begin.
First, I want to thank the board for allowing me to speak tonight. This is definitely a very important thing. I have 2 children in District 186. My son is in 3rd grade. He's in a special ed class. He's got an IEP. The home school learning is just not working for him. He really needs that one-on-one, every day, a person right there with him to get through his day, and also really to fulfill his IEP. I really like some of the things that Ms. Mathis was talking about with what she's talking about, getting these IEP kids back in as quickly as possible. And his class has like 8 kids. So I would like the board also to consider the class size. So if what do we really need to go every other day if there's only 8 kids in the class? Look at that class and say, hey, maybe these guys ought to go every day. I also have a daughter in 8th grade. She's probably learning 40 to 50% of what she would learn if she was in school. I really worry that her and a lot of the kids like her are falling behind all the other students around us, both in the private schools and also in the towns around us that are doing in-person learning. We're putting our kids at a disadvantage. They're not going to be able to make that time back up. And the last thing I kind of want to talk about, we've learned a lot about COVID since it first came out, and it's not a death sentence. People get sick with it, and I'm sure all of you know people who have had it, and most cases are minimal, a bad cold type symptoms for 3 or 4 days. We can't put our kids' lives on hold forever because of this. To me, there's not a real good medical reason not to be having these kids in school. I checked the CDC website yesterday, and the survivability rate in the United States is 97%. That's pretty good, but the survivability rate in Sangamon County is listed at 98%. If you take out the cases of the nursing homes and the cases of the perhaps misclassified COVID deaths, that puts a survivability rate really good for healthy kids and middle-aged people, parents, teachers. So I think we ought to look beyond these metrics and use some common sense here. And I've spoken with the superintendent's office at a couple of other districts that are doing in-person all the time.
And your time is up.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I believe the next person is Audrey Lupkiman. I definitely pronounced that wrong.
Ms. Lupkiman?
Hello, I had canceled my
Okay,
comment.
we can take you off. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then the next person's not on either.
No, Carla Johnson would be the next person that's on.
She signed up to speak on
Oh yeah, sorry.
schoolwork, which I don't believe is return to learn. Now, if Ms. Johnson is talking about return to learn, then I'd be happy to have her come up. If not, it would be for public comment.
Okay. It looks like the next few are probably public
And then
comment.
I think the next one would be Nicole Scroggins. What I'm doing here is just trying to
Here she comes.
categorize between the discussion points.
Sure. Ms. Scroggins, can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, you'll have 3 minutes from the time you start, and I'll let you know once your time is up. You can begin whenever you'd like.
I have a 6th grader that transitioned this year from elementary to middle school. My son has an IEP with vision impairment being our biggest issue. On the second day of school, he had surgery to repair a macular retina detachment. He missed the very first week. It took over a week after that to switch technology out for him, and it's still not good enough. We just got his literature book today. We have no magnifier or space for one at home. Teachers met with us at school to change around his Canvas layout for him. They are doing everything they can, but I am still watching my son, who is one of the happiest kids I know, cry and tell me it's too hard. He will never regain vision in his eye, and the good eye that isn't that good is exhausted from remote learning. He was in a crosscat class in elementary school that unfortunately had a permanent sub last year. There was no continued education and no practice for remote learning for this year. I have watched past meetings and heard kids in small groups would be allowed in on a case-by-case basis. Why is my child still suffering? Every fifth grader from his crosscat class that transitioned this year waited 6 months for a teacher, again, with zero education offered. I am starting to feel like his education doesn't matter. Why should he have to continue to struggle with remote while dealing with loss of vision? Why have we not made accommodations to help our most vulnerable kids? This small group setting would make his life and many others just a little easier and give them a chance to learn like every other child has been given. I also have an 8th grader with a 504 struggling with grades. He has been a straight A student since 6th grade, maintaining high honor roll status until now. Is there something that we can do to transition these kids in now? Even one day a week would provide help. It's difficult to watch your children suffer and see no plans happening to resolve issues. I would like to mention I have 2 elementary age students thriving. It's hard, but they aren't suffering educationally like my middle school kiddos. I am a single mom that works full time to provide for my children. Their grandmother is their caregiver during the day, and there's only so much that she can do. I am begging you to consider, at the very least, bringing back the kids with IEPs and 504s so they have the same opportunities to education that every other typically developing child has. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that is it for the return to learn hybrid comments. So the other folks are signed up for general comment, and we'll have public comment at the end. Before we move on, does any other board member have any discussion on the metrics or return to learn? Okay, we'll move on.
I've got something.
Mr. Miller?
I just wanted to correct a statement that one of the commenters made. They said that they indicated this was union, the teachers union that was pressuring the board in order to stay remote. I can speak for myself. That's absolutely not the case. I also wanted to mention something about the petition that Sarah Rogers was nice enough to share with everybody. I spent all morning going through it, reading the comments. I wrote down a handful of them, and I just wanted to say that I agree with almost all of the comments. There were things such as kids hate being at home. We miss school. We miss our friends. We're tired of being home. This is unfair. Remote learning is frustrating. Kids need to be in school. I want to play sports. I get it. I want all of that too. I think every board member up here wants that. But just wanting to get back to normal isn't how this works. And demanding that we get back to school isn't how this works. So we're still following the data. Today we had 3 more people that died, and this is very serious. I don't care if you're older. I don't care if it's a nursing home or if you're unhealthy or if you're disabled. You know, this should be a community that looks out for everybody.
Anybody else have any discussion on this topic? Okay.
Well, what I'd also like to we're talking about, I believe there were some youth that made comments about wanting to return to school. So when you're like in 5th grade or high school, I'm not really sure that you can better articulate, I want to be back at school. So I'm not sure if we're looking for some deep, well-thought answers to why they want to return, but that's what a kid I would imagine in high school would say, I miss my friends. And I think that that matters. And I would never try to marginalize that they miss their friends, because that is real, and students' mental health, especially right now, is serious and it is real. And missing your friends and not seeing those familiar faces at school or your teachers who might have been the rights in your day is impactful. And to be honest, like I've said before, it's a privilege to be able to say that nobody should be in school right now. And it's a privilege a lot of people don't have. So again, Mr. Miller, it's nothing for us to keep our kids home, move them around, or whatever we have to do, but not everyone has that option or that opportunity. And I think that, we can't just ignore that we have a very diverse community that has a lot of different needs for a lot of different reasons.
And
So I appreciate that those kids took the time to even say anything or weigh in on how they felt, because I'm not really sure that too many people are asking them.
And I would not marginalize students' opinions either, but you also have to recognize you're not a legal adult until you're 18, and you can only take their opinions for so much. If I asked my kids what they wanted to do, we'd be eating mac and cheese every day for dinner. That's not going to happen. Like I said, I am not supportive of remote learning because I think it's a great substitute for in-person. I don't have the privilege of making this work either. I don't really know how this is working. I'm just plowing through it because I know if we open the floodgates right now, based upon our numbers, we're going to be shutting right back down. I'm telling you what, there's going to be a bunch of pissed off parents when that happens.
To the over 18 comment, we have a person under 18 who's going to be giving a report here in a few minutes. And so I think a lot of our students do have an opinion that should matter. So I would question the 18 and over being the threshold for that, but that's just me. Any other discussion on this topic? Seeing none, we'll move into new business. Does any board member have any new business? Seeing none, as I foreshadowed, we will move into student business. Mr. Brondike.
Hi. So today what I wanted to kind of go over is just an update on how students are handling online learning. I've heard a lot of feedback from classmates of mine, people from different schools, posts on social media, and there's quite a few people who are struggling with remote learning right now. Some people, they are doing okay with it, but that's if their learning style is independent, they can kind of go on their own. And for a lot of people, that's not the case. So unfortunately, they're just trying to pass their classes at this point. I know a lot of the work that my classmates and I have gotten, we're doing it to get it done so that we don't fail. And not a lot of it, we're not necessarily doing it to learn or retain information. And there are some students from my school who actually spoke up about that and said, hey, this isn't working. We're stressed. We're not learning. We need help. And from that, one of the students actually emailed Superintendent Gill. And from that, we were able to have a meeting with my principal, Mr. Trigg, Mrs. Gill, and then some classmates of mine. And I'm happy to say that we actually got, things we talked about to the administration. We told them that, the level of homework is very stressful and, it might not be the best way to learn with remote. And the Southeast administration was very helpful. They listened to everything that we said, and they actually, put a plan out in front of us and said, what do you want us to do to help you with it? So one of the options that my principal gave us is, we're going to sit down with the department chairs and maybe give them a limit on how many assignments that they can give, just as a possibility. And Mrs. Gill and Mr. Trigg really listened to the students and myself on what we needed to be successful to get through this. And I think that's just really important right now. It's just communication. And I really want to stress that to my classmates and to all the students out there. If there's something that's not working, and if there's something that you're struggling with, you have to speak up on it and you have to tell someone that it's not working in order for it to get it fixed. And most likely, with what we're going through right now, the administrators, they're going to do everything that they can to help you be successful and to help fix it to where we can, do good with everything that we're doing online. And overall, I would just say that the students, we're looking forward to the day that we'll be able to go back to the classrooms.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments for the student report?
I have a question. So how much homework are these teachers actually giving in this remote learning situation? Are they trying to teach more than they would teach in an ordinary classroom day?
So it depends really for student to student. So last year I only had one AP class. This year I'm taking 5. So personally for me, it was kind of hard to see, am I getting more work because it's online or am I getting more work because those are the classes that I signed up for? But I've talked to students, their schedules, they kind of range from, they're taking average classes or they're taking a high course load class, and they all seem to have a common factor of they're getting a lot of work, like a lot of work. Um, and then also, especially with the high school students, a lot of us do have after school jobs and things like that. And then also some students, they do have to take care of their siblings and help their younger siblings learn throughout the day. So having to do that plus going to work and, everything in your home life, it gets kind of hard to get homework done sometimes when there's an excessive amount assigned.
So are they giving you a couple days to get this work assignment done? It's not Monday, you do it Tuesday and you have to hand it in Wednesday.
So for some of the roundtable members I've talked to, some students, they have 24 hours, just like they would at a regular school day, until the period the next day. Some students, they've had, assignments that are due at 11:59 p.m. the same day that they've been assigned. But we kind of talked about that during our meeting with Mrs. Gill to kind of stop that from happening.
Okay, so Superintendent, are you on? Can you say something? Mrs. Gill?
Muted.
Sorry about that. I unmuted for a minute. Yes, we did. We talked about that, and we had the principal with the students in the room. And as Preston said, we think the best place to have these conversations is with our department chairs at each of the high schools, so that they can discuss the workload and discuss maybe how the work is being given in order to make sure that they understand if students are in class on asynchronous days or not in class or not doing the work, and how that all interplays together. So once again, it seems like we've been in this forever, but we really haven't been in this environment where everything counts. Last school year, things were a little bit different. There was a lot of grace given. There was a lot of, let's just get through this hard time. And now it's about students being held accountable for their work, and also teachers being held accountable with the students on the work that they're given. So I think the one thing that Preston didn't add that I heard is that students really want meaningful work. They don't want just busy work. They really want to make sure that work is meaningful and it's going to move their learning forward. So I think these conversations are best held, with the department chairs and between the students and the administration at the school level.
At all the schools, not just Southeast.
Right. His came to the forefront this week and we addressed it, but he has been talking with student roundtable members from across the district, and we do have a meeting coming up this week. So you want to talk about that a little bit, Preston?
Yeah, so our last superintendent roundtable meeting, the students, we worked together to kind of figure out how things are going so far. And we're going to do a follow-up on Wednesday just to see if anything's changed from the last meeting and to see, what students are still possibly struggling with, and then kind of talk about solutions on how the district and then administrators can help us out with that.
Anybody else have anything for student business? Mr. Brondike, do you have anything else?
Nope, that's
I
all.
just wanted to say, Preston, thank you.
Yeah, I would say to you and to the members of the student roundtable and to all our students, it's recognized the leaders that you are, and your opinions do matter. I've worked with youth programming my entire career, and I would take many of those under 18 over those over 60 any day of the week to run this country. So thank you so much. We'll move on to presentations to the board.
Yes, we do have one short presentation tonight. Just give you an update on our transportation report as a part of regular business. And he's also going to cover a little bit around the safety and needs that we may have in relation to return to learn as well. So I'll introduce Dr. Lance Thurman, our Director of Transportation. Julie, if you put up the presentation.
Superintendent Gill and President McFarland, members of the board. Mrs. Hammers, are you able to load my presentation? Thank you. I just wanted to share with you tonight, the board has had some questions along the way on our progress with our first student vendor, and also just wanted to share with you some of the reopening exercises and activities that we're undertaking as a part of preparing the fleet for our students to potentially return at some point. Next slide, please. Okay, in regard to the 3-year contract that we entered into with First Student at the end of last year, one of the items they have added an additional site manager here in Springfield to support and work with Mr. Gosen, and his name is Dylan Gregg. Dylan comes out of the Army, and interestingly enough, Dylan has a chemical weapons background as far as radioactive items, nuclear items, biochemical, and some things like that, which we've actually been utilizing in some of our sanitation processes. Additionally, the digital camera systems, Seon systems we talked about last year with the bidding process. The router was installed at the end of August. The modem and network are now set up. I had a chance last week to actually see all those cameras and their processes and loading up over at the bus fleet. This will be a very helpful improvement for our building administrators when we deal with student discipline. As you can see, tablet technology with our buses and also with the hardware for tablets, some of those items were pushed back even into January before they would be delivered because of the COVID shutdowns in the manufacturing area. And I believe the Chicago office for First Student and also their national office in Cincinnati was very critical in pushing that wasn't okay for our contract in District 186. So we're going to see some of those items here in the month of October. We'll be very busy, but I think one of the key things is we still are on target to have the whole process operational and collect data to be able to report back to the board at the end of December for metrics that we're developing to look at during that December month. New buses are trickling in with the bulk of these expected by the end of October. In addition, the 20 remaining buses, and what they've also done that I'm pleased with is add the 6 buses we have coming for next year in altogether right now, just because of the ebb and flow in manufacturing, and those 26 buses should be arriving after the first of the year. Next slide, please. The recent contract amendment that we worked through, similar to last year, provides for an 80% rate for the routes, which is basically our drivers, and also an 80% rate for the monitor charge. One new addition this year is that the student rate, we have a separate billing that is for any riders over 475. That is our minimum number. So we bill up to that, but any kids we take in addition to that, for example, this year we had about 760 initially signed up. We will not be charged more than that 475 minimum rate during this time as we move through this hybrid return to learn process. Additionally, we wrote that in looking for drivers, we will have a priority in the Central Illinois area here in Springfield. This amendment does not affect in any way the district's hybrid or remote decisions. And it is set to conclude on December 31st, although if we're in a situation where we're still looking at items like today, it gives us the ability to come back to the table and look at doing something again for the second semester. In looking at this process, we're seeing a projected savings of between $700,000 and $900,000 for the first semester as a result of this. Next slide, please. This is just a graphic just for your knowledge. This is something that I have been working with the First Student site leadership team on, very initial percentages and some ideas to give us something to shoot for during this time. And what I would say our activity right now has been around that hybrid 3, if you look right in the middle of this visual depiction. And that would be that targeted group that we've been discussing this evening, looking at life skills, instructional cross-categorical students, and also our emotional disorder students. Next slide, please. I'd just like to share some reopening highlights with you from 2020 school year. Ken Gilmore is working with the Regional Office of Education, and one of the things out of this process is we in District 186, and primarily Ken, will be putting together a virtual bus evacuation video. This is one of the required safety requirements that we have each year for schools, and so we're looking at putting this out there, working with the communications office, but also First Student, in putting a video together that will likely be used in the county and potentially beyond. At this time, we have had 183 students attending the Capital Area Career Center since September 1st. Those students will start attending 4 days a week, and that will begin tomorrow. Hope, our vocational school, and also the Hope Learning Center, we have 5 students there that began today. District 186 athletics and activity bus seating, we've developed a chart that we've been using that begins our ideal seating process, begins in the back and it goes diagonally. Part of that process is to limit exposure, but also assist us with contact tracing. First Student is working with developing magnetic name placards that will be able to place right above the window to help with our targeted populations coming back. We've begun First Student and the District 186 transportation team meeting bi-monthly to try and address the different nuances that we're seeing as a part of this current reality. And beginning on September 25th, those meetings became weekly. Each Friday we're getting together, and that will continue through November 13th just to watch this targeted process and any opportunities we may have to bring students back, or ultimately to be ready to bring hybrid students back. And so that's given us a fair amount of agility in this process and really trying to work and meet some building needs as they've been doing their return to learn planning. Next slide, please. I just wanted to address with you First Student cleaning. Deep cleaning sanitation of our buses occurred last year. The fleet has concentrated primarily on protective equipment and bus decontamination. We've also worked heavily on the decontamination processes at their facilities over at Cook and Dirksen. They have actually constructed barriers. They have some of the 6-foot marking tape that we've been talking about in the district. They've been putting in plexiglass screening areas. They've completely done a remodel in their building 3 as a result of managing that traffic flow for COVID, and also made some significant upgrades to their bullpen in building 1. As they've looked at our process for keeping the buses clean, one of the key items we looked at in this situation was instantaneous disinfection with our cleaning process, prolonged environment protection, and a sprayer application. And what we've been able to do through nanotechnology is come up with a microbial shield that will last for 30 days on our buses. That covers every surface. It seals to everything. It actually attracts the virus, not only corona, but also flu, mold, and other things like that. And then, for lack of a better word on my end, it impales that virus, thus eliminating the process of spreading or spreading through touch, and also the ability to get out and kind of develop into a super virus from there. So we have developed a cleaning process. All the buses we've been using for the Career Center and Hope have gone through this nanotechnology shield. We do have a daily application available in the event that we would have, like we've discussed this evening, have an outbreak and be able to apply and not decontaminate or disturb that shield that's on the bus. And I believe now I've got it open for any questions that you may have. I'll try to answer. Oh, excuse me. One more slide. In doing this work with First Student, we've been following the Student Transportation Aligned for Return to School guidelines. There's 27 items. This is put together by the 3 major public school transportation agencies in the country. I've already talked a little bit about our bus seating process. I don't know if you can see it very well in that picture, but we do have the seats labeled that students wouldn't sit in. and it provides for that diagonal pattern, which helps us try to maximize that 6-foot social distance cushion of protection, and then also eliminate students that might be cross-contaminated. One other item that First Student is working on with us is temperature checks. We have a process for that, and we have worked, I know, at least with one school at this point on trying to individualize that to some extent with their drop-off procedures. And so now I'll try to take questions that you may have.
Any board member have any discussion or questions? Dr. Thurman, I would just say thank you to you and your First Student contacts for working this out. That is not a small amount to be saved out of our budget this year, especially when we're looking at a budget crunch anyway. So I appreciate that work.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. Awesome. Thank you.
Does anybody have anything for Dr. Thurman? Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on. Business reports are up next. Superintendent Gill. Superintendent, you're muted as well.
Mr. Frotz, you're ready to roll.
I am, thank you. President McFarland, members of the board, as requested at the last board meeting, I'd like to present the board with an update on property tax collections for the 2019 tax year payable this fiscal year 2021. Attached to my report is a schedule of the property taxes received in comparison to the extensions for tax years 2018 and 2019. While total collection percentages through June is typically around 50%, our collections through June of 2020 were just over 42%. However, that deficiency early on in the payment cycle was mitigated through higher than normal July through September collections. Through September, the district collected 94.2% of taxes due, which was about half a percentage point higher than the same time frame last year. Based on these figures, I do expect to reach at or slightly below 100% collectability for the 2019 taxes extended. And as of October 1st, outstanding state payments totaled 1.9 million, all of which were for fiscal year 2021. Everything is paid up in full through FY 19-20. The full schedule is also attached.
Does anyone have any discussion or questions for Mr. Fritz? Thank you, Mr. Fritz. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to consent action items. Superintendent Gill.
President McFarland and members of the board, I recommend approval of consent action items 9.2 through 9.7 as described in the corresponding resolutions.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Miller?
I've got a question on 9.5.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, so this is an effort to transfer funds to pay off our line of credit.
Yes, that's correct, in the self-insurance fund.
And that's the line that was in the 3 million range.
We have two lines. I believe both are for $6 million, one with Commerce Bank and one with United Community Bank.
Was there one for 3 million about though that was for the healthcare shortage that we were borrowing from? Is that what this is going towards?
That's exactly it, correct. So that was of the 6 million we have with a line of credit with Commerce Bank, we were borrowed at about 3.3 million currently.
Okay, so I guess my question, I think this is smart to pay that loan off so we're not paying 2.8% interest. But I wonder, back in May when we were talking about how long it was going to take to pay that line of credit off, we were arguing between a 3-year range and potentially a 10-year range. I just wonder, was this always an option to just transfer from the ed fund?
Well, I think it was an option, yes, but we had to do it during a time of year when we had excess cash in the other funds to be able to afford to go ahead and pay off the line of credit temporarily. This is our time of year when we're most flush with cash after having received our last set of tax payments. So I really thought this was the best time of year to go ahead and proceed. We'll have to revisit this in the spring months or late winter months as your cash reserves are depleted though.
Well, and again, I don't argue that this is the financially sound thing to be doing. I think it would have been nice to know if this was an option a few months earlier, though, when we were making these decisions on the healthcare plan.
Well, Mr. Fretz, just to clarify, you say temporarily, and in my experience with the board, this is something that continues year after year. We're moving cash around to offset any kind of rates that we don't want to see, but it doesn't mean that we're continuing to not dig into a hole in one line over another. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And that's what our working cash fund is for, is to be able to have that flexibility to try and keep us out of debt to the extent that we can, but also want to do it at a time of year when we aren't having shortages in the other funds. And particularly as we get into late spring, early summer, before we start receiving tax monies in heavy demand, we are in a shortage period at that time. That's why I didn't make that decision or that recommendation at that particular point.
So that line won't disappear. We'll have to lean back on that line of credit again.
That's very possible in about 5 to 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted some clarification on it. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Ms. Johnson, did you have your hand up?
Oh, go ahead. I think you got it. Let's
Okay.
go. Let's go.
Anybody else have any discussion? Now we'll move into immediate vote on the consent action items. Will the secretary please read the roll?
Yes. Mathis,
Aye.
McFarland,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Ringer,
Aye.
Zimmers,
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye. President on 9.7, please.
Okay. Mars.
Aye.
Okay. That is,
May I amend my vote?
yes.
I want to be present on 9.7 too. I forgot to talk about that one.
Okay. That is 7 aye votes with the noted present on 9.7 by Ms. Johnson and Mr. Miller.
And the chair of the ayes have it. Consent action is approved. We'll move into roll call action items. 10.1 approval of personnel recommendations. Superintendent.
Mr. Chairman. President McFarland and members of the board, the superintendent recommends adoption of the personnel recommendations as presented.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Okay, Mr. Ringer had the second there. Any discussion? Okay, now we'll move into immediate vote on personnel.
McFarland,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
thank you. Ringer,
Aye.
Zimmers,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Mars,
Aye.
Mathis.
Aye.
That is 7 aye votes.
And the chair of the ayes have it. We'll move on. We have some more public comment. Before then, though, we have announcements. Our next regular meeting will be Monday, October 19th, 2020. It will start at 5:30 with executive session and move into general session at 6:30. So now we will move into public comment. I believe last I checked, we have 2. Oh, it looks like 3 potentially. Oh, no, 2 again. So it looks
2.
like Mr. Graves is up first.
Mr. Graves, are you there?
I am.
Okay, you'll have 3 minutes from the time you start, and I will let you know once your time is up. You may begin.
Having some recent time to properly reflect on life and what it's all about, I'd like to take my 3 minutes and capture thoughts of mine that I feel warranted. And if we neglect not to step up and address them together, we do an injustice to our entire and diverse community. First, I want to speak to our students returning in person. I want to capture on record that I openly admitted to advocating for concerns about our members and others in the community. The Springfield Education Association, however, was not the muscle behind the all-remote start this year. We did openly express concerns over rising case counts, concerns over local medical professionals and clinicians, and the planning, coordination, and safety protocols not yet in place to protect everyone. We have agreed with the district administration and Board of Education a 10-day notice before returning in person so that every staff member, parent, and student would have adequate time to prepare and troubleshoot. Although not having received them as of yet, the superintendent has assured us tonight that the plans will be shared with the union and all building staff members, and we look forward to vetting them as we should and hope all parents and community members will as well. If those are solid, SEA is entirely behind a hybrid return. Secondly, I would like to address elections and proposals on the ballot next month. I'm not openly stumping for any particular concept this evening or party. What I would like to remind all, however, is that every person tuning in, and thousands not, are backers of public education. As difficult as the decisions are to make in these tenuous times, I'd implore all to listen carefully at how each of these ballot proposals or candidates of public education affect us. If we make mistakes on this election, we face public education changes which we might not be able to affect locally. Lastly, and most gravely, I want to address the concept of eternity and how we spend our efforts on this earth. I appreciate the superintendent's moment of silence for my father. He relished his year at Fairview before Vietnam, but more so his 17 years teaching alternative ed at Douglas, Lawrence, JDC, and other locations amongst the quiet, unspoken heroes of Springfield Public Schools 186. My heart goes out to Monica, my Southeast High School classmate. Marcus Butler Sr.'s mentoring work in alternative education and the outlet changed lives forever. And I absolutely hope that somebody is brave enough to pick up that flag and keep charging. In a parallel vein, I want to address the violence and the deaths of young Springfield 186 youth who have died far too early, murdered at the hands of others lost in intentional shootings. It's easy for us to pretend that this doesn't affect us, that our location in town, we are safe from this. But it absolutely affects all of us. This is our city, this is our community, and we all need to reach out together to hold our community together. Thank you, Springfield.
Thank you,
Mr. Gray. I believe our last public comment is Brooke Croak.
Ms. Croak, are you there? Hello? I don't know, she appears to be on, but
Yeah, we'll give her a second. She's not muted, so.
yeah.
Ms. Croak?
Mute came on for a moment. Yep. Miss.
Okay.
Okay.
And if Ms. Croak is trying to talk right now and we're just not hearing you, if you want to email the board secretary, boe@sps186.org, we can get that information out to the board members as well too. Okay, before we adjourn, does any board member have any other business? Okay, seeing no further business before the board, we are adjourned until the next regular board meeting, which is Monday, October 19th, 2020. Thank you, everybody.